everyone. Welcome to Film Talk, a video and audio podcast about two gals talking about film, television, and everything in between the reels. I'm Juliana Melendez, head of marketing and a critic here at FullCircleCinema.com. And as my co-host on this new endeavor,
Hi, I'm Josie Melendez. We are in no way related, but we have an awesome last name.
we
And
sure do. We are both Melendez, but no relation.
Exactly. I mean, very typical in Puerto Rico. Who knows? Maybe we could be long lost cousins.
Everyone's a cousin in some way here, just in some way, shape, or form. But we haven't gone down that rabbit hole.
Yes, maybe someday.
Tell us who you are. Tell us who you are, where you're from.
Yes, I am a critic for Full Circle Cinema, as well. I am a co-host for the Film Posers podcast.
Yes, and we will be linking everything down below, all the Twitter handles, all the links. She has an amazing podcast with her team, Film Poser, so obviously go check it out. And today, for our premiere episode, we are going to be talking about this weekend's number one in the U.S. on Netflix series, Selena, the series. We binged it. I just recently, just like an hour and a half ago, finished it. We have thoughts. A lot of people have loved it. A lot of people have not so much loved it. And I think both sides have their valid opinions, and we're going to talk about it. So here we are. Josie, would you like to start us off on what we were just discussing a little bit here about what was like the main kind of pushback on the series?
Yes. So starting off, after watching the series, we revisited the trailer. Mm-hmm. And we were right on this opinion that I am about to tell you, which is, despite it being Selena the series, she is very much a secondary character. She falls behind in the narrative to her male counterparts, which is a little sad because you have this character that usually, like this idol, this figure that is seen as a frontrunner for representation when it comes to female singers, especially in the Tejano culture. And then she just falls behind her brother and her father, which I understand how they had a lot to give and contribute to what Selena became, but it wasn't what was promoted to us.
Yeah, they really just kind of made this whole epic introduction, and like the trailer went super viral, millions of views, and it was like this whole epic teaser for Selena the star, the Selena, this icon that, befell to tragedy. And we really didn't get that, though. I understand and I appreciate historical context is super important because, behind Selena, there was a family, there is a team of people that helped get her there. But it kind of felt, and I think we'll be discussing the details further on, but it felt like Selena was really pushed back, not only as a character, these were real people. She was just kind of set to the side just most of the time, and then we just see more of her family dynamic aside from her. Not that we don't see her, but it's not the spotlight that was promoted was not given, at least in this part, because for those of you that do not know, this is kind of a part one, which I didn't know until recently, and as recently as half an hour ago, so I'm very prepared. But yeah, aside from that, we also discussed how we're going to discuss as well, which has been part of the discourse around the series, how Selena herself was whitewashed or has been whitewashed quite a bit. And it was just really disappointing because you see Selena was, this beautiful, iconic brown Mexican American woman who became a pop idol in the late 80s and early 90s, and you casted someone, and I'm not hating on the actress. I think she's doing the best that she's can with what she's given. If I'm not mistaken, this is the same girl from like The Walking Dead, but like in seasons that I didn't finish watching. And she is a Mexican American as well. But they cast someone who looked more like J-Lo rather than someone who looked more like Selena. And that's problematic. And it's kind of
Yeah.
disappointing because we're here fighting for representation, and you're just net and it doesn't surprise me that Netflix did this. I would assume that Netflix had the most influence behind this decision, to just kind of lighten the family as a whole. Like, here's Latinx representation, but we're gonna
Mhm.
make it more palatable. Everyone's still pretty pale. And I don't know if this happened to you when you saw, spoiler, there's a scene where there's a photo shoot. So, when they started like
Mhm.
taking pictures of her, and it's like, oh, your complexion is so warm. And then, Selena was like, oh, it's part of being Mexican. And I'm like, where's the warmth, sir? She's very
Yeah.
pale. I think Ariana Grande has more fake tanner than she does. And not to say that it's okay, not saying
Yeah.
that that's okay for Ariana Grande to do, but it
Mhm.
was kind of like, who are you fooling? Because it's not me.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it was just kind of, it's those little, it's not, I can't say quirk because it feels like I'm just demeaning it, but
Mhm.
it's just like those little details like throughout the series that make you go, I really wish they hadn't gone there. Like, I really want to love this and I want to like this, but there's a lot of like things that could have been done better. But yeah,
Yeah.
what aside from, I'm not trying to bash the series because it is actually a decent series. I did
Mhm.
enjoy it. I was entertained. Um, what were your favorite parts about it, Josie?
So before I get into that, just to hop off on that comment,
Mhm.
I just felt like they were trying because at that moment I found it to be very cringe, but I understood the context of where they were coming from because of how Selena was in real life.
Mhm.
But you can't do it if the person that you casted does not reflect the person that was in real life.
Yeah,
Like, okay,
it's
now we understand that maybe she went through that, but it doesn't come off very palatable, as you
convincing.
mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just
But
weird. It was just weird to see them try to pass it off, basically.
yeah,
No
especially
hate to the
that album
actress.
cover.
That
I
album
tried to find the act.
cover,
I tried to
dude.
find the real one, and I still haven't. But I think that's just sparing me
Oh god,
because
that's sad.
that was a sad photo shoot, and you can see how uncomfortable she was, and you can only imagine how uncomfortable she must have been in real life.
Oh, absolutely. Like, not only that I do like appreciate that they included in the story was how it wasn't
Hmm.
all, obviously, as most, musical artists go through when they're trying to break through. They're made uncomfortable and trying and made to fit into a mold that is not them. And as soon as her father, like, speaking with the record label guy, when they were
Hmm.
discussing the whole thing, as soon as he was trying to justify, the record label guy was trying to justify the whole photo shoot and the concept of world, I said, 2 seconds before he said, I was like, oh, he's trying to make her look exotic. He's trying
Hmm.
to make her look more exotic. No kidding. She's a girl from
Hmm.
Texas. She's still Mexican American, but because
Hmm.
she's not the shade of milk, she's exotic. And that's kind of what they were going
Hmm.
for there. And I'm glad that they portrayed that because it did happen. Clearly, we've all seen the cringe,
Hmm.
and yeah, it's just not. It just felt really inappropriate to just have that oppression. It is oppression, so to have that oppressive sequence and an example of oppression in the music industry, even within the Latin music industry, with a girl who's not actually that dark, uh, and actually looks
Yeah.
like the person from real life. So yeah, that was quite disappointing, but it's what they delivered, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So yeah,
To answer the question that you asked,
yeah.
I just have to mention real quick that I think one of my favorite parts was Ricky.
We all stand Ricky. Ricky, if you guys haven't seen the series, honestly, please watch it because the characters slash people from real life are so
Hmm.
wholesome. I do enjoy how
Hmm.
wholesome the series is, and they didn't try to make it like dark, gritty. Like, no, this is a
Hmm.
family series, and we're seeing a family dynamic, and with the friends that were basically incorporated to become family. I think
Hmm.
it was nice to see, and I really enjoyed Ricky. So yeah, sorry I interrupted you.
Yeah. No, don't worry because that is generally how I feel about him and every other character that you feel like you are visiting a family and you're getting to see how they interact. And it's especially evident by the way that Abraham talks about touring, and whenever he admits anyone to be part of the band, it's you are in this band, therefore you are representing my family,
Yeah.
which plays out later. Like you're always expecting, how is this going to be turned on its head? And then by the end of it, you're like, oh, that way.
Yeah. Yeah, so no spoilers, but it does get
Mm-hmm.
interesting. Things do get
Yeah.
interesting, which is something that I feel like a lot of from the comments that I don't know if that you saw this as well, but you know how some
Mm-hmm.
people immediately find Latinx stories like corny or kind of boring, but
Mm-hmm.
and people just want the telenovela. They want the drama, they want the tea. But I
Mm-hmm.
enjoy that they didn't force that on this because these are real people. This is a real story. Normal people aren't telenovelas. And
Mm-hmm.
okay, fine. The first, what was it, like first 3, 4 episodes where it's really like her origin stories of where she grew up with her family,
Mm-hmm.
getting to know everyone and how the dynamic it was developing to be. um it's not a lot happens, but at the same time a lot happens. It's just you were seeing the transcourse of the evolution of this band and this family as they grew, but they're still normal people. They were still I enjoyed that they gave us historical context for the times, like the economic recessions are not new, ladies and gentlemen.
Mm-hmm.
What we're living, our parents and grandparents have lived before as well, and it sucks. And the market crashed. The market crash in the 80s also affected a lot of people, and I feel like we don't get to see that, as at least for our generation, we don't see that much historical context from the 80s in media. We usually just see, white kids in a suburban area about, discovering aliens or
Yeah.
something, Stranger Things. So that's kind of our representation of the 80s. That's how we view the 80s. It's just like, oh, cool
Mm-hmm.
stuff happening, big hair, music videos, everything's just really iconic and glittery and just shiny. But marginalized groups were affected in this era. A lot of minorities did not have the best time during the 80s, and I'm glad that they represented that. For as small as a portion of, of the episode as it was, I'm glad that they mentioned it
Mm-hmm.
because it's reaching a lot of people. It's not just Latinx watching the series. So I do
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that, and I think that's also, I think we talked about this on that viewers perspective panel we did on Film Posers. If you guys haven't seen it, check it out.
Yeah.
I'll probably also link it below.
Definitely.
But that whole ordeal of, okay, should I just support this because it's Latinx,
Mm-hmm.
whether or not it's problematic? I think in this case, we're allowed to criticize. We're allowed
Yeah.
to hold them accountable for the mistakes that they did throughout the show. But you have to appreciate, or you can at least try to appreciate that this was elevated to a huge platform. And this is like a
Yeah.
big story that I saw some comments being like, oh, this didn't bring anything new to the story. This is stuff we already knew. I didn't know. I'm
Mm-hmm.
young. I didn't see the original movie. Selena's music was not part of my era or my generation. I listened to it sometimes when it would come on the radio and yada yada, but a lot of us Gen Z millennials or Zillennials, who whatever they want to call us, we don't know about these stories, and we think we do because okay, yes, that's Selena Quintanilla. She sang "Como la Flor," and that's about it.
Yeah.
And she had these iconic looks, the fashion, like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that she designed her own like costumes.
I did not know
That's
that.
so impressive. That is so impressive to me. She designed them. She wanted to make her own line that was accessible to normal people. And there was more to Selena than just the music. And I think, kind of circling back to the trailer expectation versus the series, I really had hopes that we had seen more of that, but I think that's probably what they're planning for in a part two. Like, I feel like they promoted the part
Mm-hmm.
two of the series rather than the part one just to get people to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Especially when talking about the recession, I knew she had humble origins, but I didn't know to what extent. Like the
Hmm.
moment that AB has to dumpster dive for peach cans and their lights are handmade with those peach cans. and the fact that they got kicked out of their house and had to live with their uncle, and just all those details are very interesting to see because again,
Mhm.
I don't know anything about her life other than the music that you would listen from time to time on the radio. The fact
Mhm.
that J Lo made a movie about her life, but I hadn't seen it, but I knew about it,
Mhm.
and a children's picture book that I read about her life. So that's pretty much it. And all I knew from that picture book was that she had a humble origins. She was a very lively and bubbly person, and her relationship, her death, and that her family was a little strict, especially her father that was always looking out for her, which I think they captured very well in the series because it wasn't
Mhm.
a villainous kind of way that sometimes
They didn't
fathers
antagonize
are
him for being
portrayed.
a strict
Yeah,
father, and I appreciate that.
yeah,
He was kind
there
of,
was
he had
heart
his
to it.
moments. He had his
Yeah,
moments where you were just like, dude, that's not fair. But that's also
you
like,
have to stop.
yeah. I was like, maybe you're being a little like hard on your kids right
Hmm.
now, but that's Latino parents for you, basically. I think
Yeah.
he had a point. He was like the reason behind the strictness and the rigidity in the
Hmm.
dynamic was very valid, especially with the whole no
Hmm.
drinking, no drugs. Like, this is a wholesome, this is a clean environment. You're represented, this is a family. And I think upholding those values and those morals is really important, and it worked for them, and to a certain extent, obviously, because it kept them out of a lot of trouble, that especially in that era, that a lot of bands,
Hmm.
and especially younger bands, would get into. So yeah, I did. It was really relatable, I'm not gonna lie.
Hmm.
Because you watch
Yeah,
it and
they
just
did a
like,
very good. Yeah, they did a very good job of humanizing him. Like, there were times when I was like, "Oh, he's being very strict," but then they justify it in a way. Not that you
mhm,
would agree with him, but you understood where he was coming from. So I really appreciated that detail.
mhm.
Still, it makes me very sad that I think his character was the most developed of the entire series. Selena to
Yeah,
me felt a little one dimensional.
she was
I,
peppy. She was the peppy
yeah,
girl that could sing.
it felt definitely like a memory you have of someone.
Mhm,
I couldn't relate to her as a person. I didn't. It's sometimes you have characters that they feel like actual people
mhm,
that you would meet walking down the street. And even though we all know Selena, I felt like that was the only thing they wanted us to depend on. Like, oh, we all know Selena, we all know her story, but I wanted to connect with her in the show as if I'd never known her. And I found it a little hard because ultimately I started to depend on the fact that, oh, I know about her. That's enough.
mhm. Yeah, and it was kind of, how do I put this? Having her is that assumption that everyone knows her story, when not
Hmm.
everyone knows her story. Not everyone knows how she was. This happened. The 90s were a long time ago, y'all. We think
Hmm.
they were just 10 years ago, but the 90s were a hot minute ago. It's been over 25 years since, I believe she
Hmm.
she passed in 1994, if I'm not mistaken. That was 26 years ago. Times have changed, and a lot of people have not kept up with that, and a lot of people just don't know,
Hmm.
and they just know like the breadcrumbs left over of that story, and it's just kind of been reduced to not so much a stereotype, because it's like, so the stereotype of Selena isn't really a thing, but like it's
Hmm.
just reduced to that one. Okay, Selena does this. She had red lipstick. She wore mostly just bustiers on stage, and she was very
Hmm.
shiny and glittery and peppy. She was just peppy. Like, no, she was a real
That
person,
was it.
and
That was all
I
you
don't
got
know.
from the show, which is sad.
It is sad, and for a show that's literally titled after her, you would expect more, and
Mhm.
I don't think that's asking too much. Not I'm not saying the
Yeah.
show's bad, but I don't think it's asking too much to get a little bit more intimate with the star of the show and getting into her
Yeah.
story. Maybe they're kind of depending on that to be the focus of season 2, or part 2, I should say,
Maybe.
but I'm not I can't say I'm not hopeful. I am hopeful, but I don't see it as like a surefire thing. I can't guarantee that that's what they're going to go for, because so far they've gotten like a lot of story just by focusing on the male counterparts surrounding her. Um, because they even focus more on them than they do on the sister.
Hmm.
I do enjoy the Suzette and Selena dynamic. I think that
Yeah.
that's really wholesome. And I for one, like, I didn't grow up having a sister or anything, but I really liked how they weren't competing with each other.
Hmm.
Because you know how usually when you have stories that tend to focus on men or male counterparts, you have like the few women competing with each other, or just kind of like being
Yeah.
a little bit catty. And I enjoyed that that was not the case here. Like at its heart, which the show has a lot of heart. At its heart, it was just a really loving sisters and their mom. Um, Finding their way in this group in a boys club,
Hmm.
basically. And that is kind of unfortunate. You have like this whole huge group behind Selena, because it wasn't just Selena, it was the band. And it was the only girls are Selena and Suzette. It's just them
Hmm.
in a tour bus full of guys. So
Yeah.
they could have explored that too. But they mostly just had Selena. Selena's screen time was mostly reduced to her and Chris with like her love interest, which
Yeah.
was also like the most we saw of her exploring and becoming her own person was depending on the
Yeah.
guy. Which, of course, if
And
that's what happened, that's what happened. But yeah.
yeah, and bouncing off of what you just said, I just thought that basically I didn't feel like she had an opinion on anything at any point, other than I think the most notable moment would be when she wanted to wear her own jacket.
Hmm.
But it's sad that is the only one I can think of.
Yeah. It was mostly her ever being assertive. Gotta be assertive.
Mhm.
Was with fashion. And
Mhm.
what you could kind of perceive from the series of Selena was that well, I guess I was homeschooled, she was homeschooled, so I get that. And she's
Mhm.
just kind of really been sheltered. Selena's very sheltered. And
Mhm.
it is difficult to kind of discover yourself and find your own person and personality. But they only kind of let her have that authority through fashion as an outlet. And again,
Mhm.
her sister Suzette is the one who's executive producing or executive produced this series. So
Yeah.
this is, if I'm not mistaken, the first series where the family was behind the production and actually like approved of the story and kind of gave the green light for a lot of things. But I feel like Selena was more than just the fashion, and even if that's what she loved to do, I'd have loved to see more of that, more of like
Mhm.
we got a small montage of her creating like some new
Mhm.
costumes with her sister, and I feel like that was like the most exciting episode with all
Yeah.
of them. I think her creating like her passion for creativity and like the visual arts in a sense, because fashion is very visual. That was the most we saw her kind of blossom. And even if they
Yeah.
had just focused on that a little bit more, I think it would have been helpful to help see her as a human, as a three-dimensional character. um but yeah, I guess it is also kind of difficult to make characters out of real people more interesting than they were, if that's how her
Yeah.
family wants to portray her, if that's how they remember her. Like, oh yes, she did the costumes, she did this and that, and that's you kind of start to question if whether or not the narrator is reliable. And that's rather unfortunate with a
Correct.
lot of biopics, por decirlo así. I'm going to say something slightly controversial. I don't know if you'll agree with me, but I did find myself comparing the vibes or like the formula, because you know how music artists biopics have a certain formula. I find myself
Mhm.
comparing it to Bohemian Rhapsody quite a bit.
Okay.
Just because it
Yeah.
was like, I don't know if you feel me, because Bohemian Rhapsody
Mhm.
was like super dependent on the music itself. And
Yeah.
it was kind of just like straightforward. It felt like a slideshow at certain points
Mhm.
of the series where,
That's
yes,
how
look
I
at these
felt.
songs. Look at these songs. I feel like they didn't overdo it at the very
Hmm.
least with the music, because it could have very easily just done it like a musical series and just have her perform like the hit songs and that for most of the episodes and that be it. So I felt like the balance was good, but I did find myself comparing it a little bit to the Bohemian Rhapsody formula,
Yeah.
rather more leaning towards that rather than leaning away from Rocket Man, because I feel like Rocket Man is peak music artist biopic.
Rocket Man deserved better.
That is a whole other segment, ma'am, that we can rant on
But
for like 2 hours. But yeah.
I agree with you, except I did not compare Selena the series to Bohemian Rhapsody.
Okay.
I compared it to Subete a mi moto, which should be on Prime Video eventually.
Okay.
And that is not shade, because I remember some people in my comments when I said that being like, is this shade? And I'm like, no, sir. Because I mean, I stopped watching Subete a mi moto because it
Uh-huh.
got repetitive and I couldn't, the narrative was odd for me. Maybe once it's up on Prime Video, because there's a whole deal with WAPA. Anyways, once
Uh-huh.
it's on
Yeah.
Prime Video here, I will binge it completely
Okay.
and then I'll give my honest opinion on how I feel. But
Okay.
the pilots are very similar between the two, because
Okay.
it is a male centered story about how this man brings together a band, and then we follow this band. That is literally how Subeta Mimoto starts. Especially, there's one part at the end of the pilot, which never happens again, so I found it very weird, where there's like a small title card in the corner where it's like early years of the band, these two people. And they do that a lot in Subeta Mimoto because we know how Menudo changed their members a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I found it very weird that they did that in the first episode and they never did it again.
That's so
But
odd.
again, if you watch the two pilots, they're pretty similar. So I couldn't
Okay.
shake that off.
Yeah,
But
that's unfortunate. I mean,
that
formula.
definitely,
If it ain't broke, don't
exactly.
fix it. But yeah, it's
It
just
definitely felt like
something.
a formula.
Yeah, it's sometimes when it comes to biopics, it's formulas are something you can't really shake. And
Mm-hmm.
from what the impression, I don't know if you got this impression, but this episode literally started like the trailer. Like she would, it was very
Mm-hmm.
epic. She's going on stage, with the fans and all that, and she's at her like at the height of her stardom, basically. And then it cuts go, and we're going to her origin story. And little old me, not knowing this was a part one and thinking that the 9 episodes would have covered the whole thing, thought that we were going to see the story leading up to back, full circle moment,
Me
very
too.
branded. Right? You feel like it's gonna go full circle. It's like, okay, we're gonna catch up to that moment where we started in the series, where she's finally singing "Como la Flor," which is like, if I'm not mistaken, like one of her biggest hits.
Yeah.
Um, but all we got was 3 episodes of a back plot back in the background, just AB, her older brother, simmering and cooking away at the origins of
Mm-hmm.
Como la Flor, and it came to him when he was taking a shower. Which, not everything's very glamorous. So,
Yeah.
us as creatives, when you're writing something, the best ideas come at the worst moments most of the time, which is really
Mm-hmm.
unfortunate.
And then they
But
justified it with Ricky being like, "Oh yeah, when you shower, your muscles relax and your subconscious comes through." And I'm like, Ricky.
honestly, sometimes like I love Ricky, but sometimes when he talks, I'm just like, honey, this now's not the time. Love you, but oh my god,
He's
let's get to the point.
the wise, all-knowing friend.
He really is. He's literally like he's the brains of the operation. I'm not afraid to say that. he's,
Mm-hmm.
he kind of keeps things together for everyone, and I appreciate what his character does, because it's not he's like the least cringe comic relief, because there are
Yeah.
some moments where they kind of try to force the comic relief, and there were some moments where they used really casual music. This is just me being nitpicky.
Yes.
Right? It's just
Yes.
like something really tragic is happening or something really toxic is being talked about, and it's like sitcom music. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like I'm watching Modern Family. No, this feels
Yeah.
weird. It's kind of off. I can't recall the exact example of a scene where,
I know. It was
you know,
when AB ask Selena if she's never been to Mexico or something along those lines. And she says, "Hi, I'm Selena. You've lived with me your entire life." And it's very sitcom music.
It's kind of sad because like they made fun of her, and like they try to make fun of Selena not ever having gone to where her the country where her family's from, like her
Hmm.
origins. She's just seen herself as American, and that's an identity crisis she goes through. And that's, I
Yeah.
believe, an identity crisis many people go through, especially Latinx that are born in the
Hmm.
US. Because it's not, she can't just say, "Oh, I'm Mexican," because she hasn't been to Mexico. She hasn't been born in Mexico. Yes, she's Mexican, but she's also American, and that's kind of they did kind of show that back and forth of her identity crisis.
Hmm.
But I feel like they didn't pursue it enough,
Yeah,
perhaps.
and that moment where she reflects on how when she was younger, she didn't know Spanish and now she has this hit
Mhm.
album in Spanish. I feel like that moment could have been a little bit deeper just because of what we just discussed. It is such a heavy moment and it's something that she was probably so proud of because it takes a lot to learn a second language, especially Spanish, which
Mhm.
even we get confused with.
Mhm.
And the fact that she was able to nail down all these vocals and all these lyrics and be able to speak in Spanish, especially on Johnny Canales, which was
Mhm.
a an insecurity that she had at one point, as shown in the show, to see her evolve and be able to stand her ground was groundbreaking and very inspiring. And it's just given one moment.
Yeah. It was just I feel like they could have not juiced it, because that just feels
Hmm.
insensitive. Like, oh yeah, let's really
Yeah.
juice the emotion out of the scene. But they could
Hmm.
have. They really could have just like made it, made
They
it a
earned
little
it.
bit more. They earned it. It was developed. It was something that was ongoing. It was an insecurity of hers. It's an insecurity for a lot of us who are bilingual.
Hmm.
Yes, we were born and raised in PR, but we struggle with Spanish sometimes. We struggle with
Yeah.
English sometimes, and it can be kind of a major insecurity. And I did see myself a lot. That was the thing I related to. Even though Selena was kind of presented quite one dimensional here,
Hmm.
I was able to relate to her very profoundly with that, because I didn't learn to be fluent in Spanish until I was like 17. And even then, I wasn't
Yeah.
entirely fluent because of a myriad of reasons. Everyone has their own different reasons. But when
Hmm.
you are kind of caught in the middle between two cultures, especially like your own and the one that you're assimilating to, in a sense,
Hmm.
it's hard. It's really
Yeah.
hard, because then the generation before you, like your parents and maybe your older cousins or your aunts and uncles, they know Spanish to perfection because that's like
Hmm.
technically their first language, unlike us where we don't really have a first language. In a sense, it's kind
Yeah.
of like they're both our first language. It's like, oh, what language? Your first language is the language
Hmm.
you think in. That does not help me in any way, shape, or form. I think in
No, I
both
think in both.
languages. It depends on the mood. It's the emotion. Like the human brain is
Hmm.
insane. It's honestly insane. So circling back,
Yeah.
they could have framed that evolution and that development in her character, and going from saying "Es una hermosa día" to
Hmm.
fluently, flawlessly speaking Spanish and being a hit start with 100% Spanish albums. That is the
Hmm.
biggest middle finger to literally anyone who made fun of her Spanish, because like even
Yeah.
when I had an accent, or I still do have an accent when I speak Spanish, your family members will make fun of you, and they'll be like,
Same.
"Oh, that's yeah, it's like, oh, you're such a gringa. Oh,
Hmm.
it's that's not how you say it. Oh, you're mispronouncing it," rather than like help you and tell you how it's said.
Yeah.
And I kind of saw that as well, because like everyone's like, oh, making fun of her. It's like, well, what, she doesn't know. Why don't you tell her how to say it?
Hmm.
Because that's how you learn language. And if you make fun of someone for saying something wrong or not perfectly in a language they're learning, that doesn't help
Hmm.
anyone, much less the
It's
person learning.
discouraging.
It's really discouraging, and I have a lot of mad respect for Selena doing that, because before, like
Hmm.
growing up, I didn't know Selena was Mexican American. I always was under the impression that Spanish was her first language.
Me too. I learned that
Right?
recently.
I learned recently that she's actually a Texan girl. Isn't that terrible? Or
Hmm.
I know, we're uncultured. I get it. That's fine. I've been told that too many times. But
Which honestly, I think it
it goes to
helps
show.
because for us, you and I were entertained as opposed to I have a lot of friends that have been texting me and sending me messages that they're huge Selena fans. They grew up here, but they grew up with her.
Hmm.
And they're disappointed with some aspects of the show because they know so much about her life and who she was.
Hmm.
And they're upset with the inaccuracies.
Okay.
So for us, it was easier to consume mostly. And my part, speaking for myself, I didn't know that much. So I was able to go on with the ride. And I also did not see JLo's film. So I
Hmm.
am not on the boat of let's compare the films because the JLo film is better. No, I don't know that. I can't compare the two. I like the series. Apart from all the criticisms we've given, we did
Hmm.
enjoy the series. We were entertained. The only thing is that we think it can improve, and most likely they will have a part two.
Hmm.
So constructive criticism is never bad. It's what makes the business it is. The
Hmm.
entertainment industry builds upon that, and as Latinos, we should be able to grow. And if we're not honest, we're not helping our community.
I couldn't have
So
said it better myself. Yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to circle back to that. Despite how many things you might see online, there are people that genuinely do love the show. Clearly, it's number one. And
Hmm.
today it's still top in many Latin American countries and in the US. So I think they did a good job storytelling wise. The writers, the showrunner, Moisés, I think they did a good job in committing to a story and executing it. There are just small aspects, like a lot of people will criticize the wigs, and that is trivial. That can be changed. The only thing you can't change is a motivating character, a motivating main character. And right now, Selena doesn't feel like the main character.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I feel like once we circle back on this and eventually like see the
Mm-hmm.
part two, we'll be able to have a more complete opinion on the series. But as of right now, like you said, she doesn't feel like the star of the show. But if in a part two this was all
Mm-hmm.
building up to then seeing Selena blossom in this stage of her life, of her story,
Mm-hmm.
then okay. Then we can kind of forgive that. The wigs did not bother me that much.
Yeah.
It was
I
okay.
was not bothered either, but then I started seeing the comments and then I couldn't stop focusing on it. But
You're looking for
also,
people's lace. You were looking for that lace
yeah.
front.
But also, there people started posting pictures because even I got curious and I was like, Selena
Hmm.
had red hair. So I started looking for that, and
Hmm.
it's accurate. They're accurate. They tried to do as much justice to the real story as they could. And again, I think despite how you feel, people need to understand that telling any story, not just Selena's, any story that has had such an impact in history, especially in pop culture, is very difficult because you're trying to do justice to the story, but you also have to have those narrative beats and that very good old fashioned storytelling that's compelling enough to keep people hooked beyond relying on not relatability, but what we mentioned earlier about knowing her and who she
Hmm.
was. You need more than just that. So it's
Yeah,
very
it's not
hard,
a
and I commend them.
textbook. We're not reading a
Mm-hmm.
history textbook. We're watching a story unfold. So you do have to
Yeah.
take, your artistic liberties, but artistic liberties are not the same as whitewashing. Let me just say that. That's not the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
But
No. No. We do not
for anyone
promote
watching,
whitewashing
it's
on
like,
Film
oh
Talk.
no, we can take artistic no, no, that's not how it works, sweetie.
No.
No.
No. No. No. No. No. No.
Yeah,
And
but
I'm pretty sure there's like not to say anything against Christian Serratos. I'm pretty sure like
mhm,
she's a good actress. She portrayed the character that she was given really well.
mhm.
But I'm pretty sure there are a lot of women out there that have indigenous features, curves and all, that could have done the role as well.
And they could have done the role just as well, if not better. And
Mhm.
you wouldn't have this backlash of people being like, well, this isn't Selena, you know?
Mhm.
It kind of sucks. It sucks because we're all striving to see ourselves on the screen in some way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
And we've already seen a white Latina. Now, obviously, not many white
Constantly.
Latinas, but you know, we've already seen a white Latina. We don't need another one.
Mhm.
If you're gonna do another one, make it appropriate. Do something
Yeah.
else. But come on, man, just throw people a bone. But but I will say, you can tell that Netflix did not really fund this show to the max. This was not a premium Netflix budget. And
Mhm.
with that being said, I feel like they did the best that they could have, because despite the
Yeah.
lower budget, it wasn't jarring. Okay,
Mhm.
fine, there was a green screen here or there, but it worked.
The car when
The
they're driving the
cars.
car.
The car's not even a green screen, it's just a projector. We're going old school here. But it didn't feel, I don't know, it didn't feel corny. I feel like if you're gonna judge the show for being corny, there's like a million and one other reasons it's corny.
Mhm.
But like for the budget, I don't know, I feel like it's unfair to judge it for its budget, because with the budget they had, they created something that was watchable. And it's not
Mhm.
like you're not cringing because, oh my god, that wig's so bad. If you're gonna cringe about the wigs, go for it. I didn't bother
Mhm.
us. They weren't that bad. And can you imagine? You kind of have to use wigs here because, like
Yeah.
they portrayed Selena. Like Selena changed her hair all the freaking time.
A lot.
Yo, I can you imagine like putting an actress through that? Like putting an actress's hair through that, frying her hair constantly? No. Or
Mhm.
and wigs are super expensive. They easily went through like dozens of wigs throughout the
Yeah.
series, if not 100. Uh, that that even with lower quality wigs, it still adds up to a lot of money. And I don't think whoever was allocating the movie budget or the series budget was like, maybe
Mhm.
wigs aren't that serious here. Like maybe that's not a super huge priority.
Someone
Let's
said, "Listen, I don't think our budget should go into all these wigs."
yeah, it's like
There was a meeting.
jolly old family good time. And I hope that it brings us more. I hope that this is kind of like that barrier that we keep kind of
Mhm.
trying to break. It's
Yes.
oh god, I really hope this breaks through the barrier of Latinx shows and not getting canceled. Unlike other series that
Yeah.
have been on Netflix, but we're not going to mention them. And I think we
It
know.
goes to show that when you promote your shows, they do well because they did a karaoke thread on their Twitter.
Mhm.
They did a virtual fan celebration on their YouTube.
Mhm.
I have never seen that before for any other Latinx show. So it just goes to show that when you put in the time and effort and promote your products, they can do well.
Isn't that crazy?
I
Who
know.
would
Who
have
would have
thought?
thought?
Who would have thunk it,
Not me.
man? Not me, clearly. And not only that, they even put some thought into the trailer. That trailer was very
Hmm.
hype. That trailer got
Yeah.
people really hype really fast. And yes, it was all mostly because of the story. It's mostly because Selena, but come on. The trailer
Yeah.
was good. Like especially that first teaser of her going on the stage, and in that moment she looked
Hmm.
very much like Selena with the hair and all of that. Dude, I thought it was J Lo in the pictures when it first came out. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie. I was like, did they
They
de-age
got her
J
back.
Lo? Did they get her? I know she's 50. I know she looks good, but I think it's pushing it.
You
And
know
then
she's
I read it
ready.
was
When
really.
she's always she know that she's ready because she's always re-wearing that one green dress. I'm pretty sure that someone would have been like, "We're gonna de-age you." She's gonna be like, "I'm here."
Honestly, if someone were to suggest J Lo needed de-aging, she would get offended. It's just like, are you really here to tell me that I don't look practically the same
Do you see
as
me?
I did 25 years ago? Because that's facts. It's not. She's
Yeah.
not Robert De Niro. This is not The Irishman. She does not need that much de-aging. They could have pulled it off. I'm not gonna lie. I was convinced because I hadn't looked into it much when it had just like they had just first like teased the posters and all that. But yeah, if you
Mhm.
guys thought it was J Lo, let us know. I honestly just want to know. But
I love that.
if you guys thought it was J Lo, let us know.
But yeah,
Probably. I don't know. But yeah, it's watch the show.
yeah. I think my last thoughts on it are definitely watch the show. Um, don't be so easily influenced by the negativity you might see because, okay, you can support a show and still critique it. And I think that's something a lot of people from the Latinx community are ignoring. You can still critique and support at the same time. And I know this is a constant discussion in the community because we want our shows to do well, but
Hmm.
they can't do well if we don't offer constructive criticism.
They can do well.
Still,
We can help them do
yeah,
well, but we want them to do better.
yeah. That being said, it was entertaining. I liked it. I couldn't stop watching it. I really wanted to know where it was going. And yes, again, it did have its things, and I know that a lot of people have not liked it, but there are also a lot of people that clearly do. And it's number one for a reason. If you can support it, if you do have the time to binge watch a new show on Netflix, which I'm pretty sure everyone does at this time,
Hmm.
I would give it a chance.
Honestly, yeah. It's judge for yourself. We have kind
Mm-hmm.
of, I think we've been fair, laying down the problems with it, but not to push the problems aside by any means because they are
No,
relevant.
because they're there and they should be given the attention that they deserve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with that in mind, I think it's still worthy of a watch. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
still worthy of at least if you don't have to watch the whole thing, but I do want to mention if anyone here watching is apprehensive about watching it or binging it, the episodes are relatively short. They fly by pretty
Mm-hmm.
quickly. They're like 37-40 minutes on average, and it's 9 episodes. So it's not a super huge investment of your time. And I think
Mm-hmm.
you'll enjoy a lot of the aspects that are positive about it aside from the problematic points about it. Because it does have good parts. So take the
Yeah.
good and the bad and judge for yourself. But I think
Mm-hmm.
that's been our first episode.
Yeah.
Where can they find you, Josie Melendez? No relation.
Well, yes. So I am the Josie Marie on both Twitter and Instagram, which
Yes.
that is very lucky of me. I don't know how I got both names on both platforms. That makes it very easy.
Fate. It was fate, honestly. Fate wanted you to be a consistent influencer. And yes, y'all,
Yes.
she's an influencer. Please follow her. And you can
Ma'am.
find me. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Captain Melendez on both platforms as well. So
We
we,
love
we
that.
both we both lucked out with our usernames. I'd like to believe. And of course, follow at Full Circle Cinema on Twitter, Instagram, and
Mm-hmm.
Facebook. Critic Miss Critic Josie here just recently did a review of Half Brothers,
Yes.
which just came
Yes.
out on Friday, I believe, in theaters.
Correct. They came out the same day.
Yeah. So
Latin excellence.
here we go. December is the month for Latin excellence. How many weeks till Christmas that we can see Pedro Pascal on Wonder Woman 1984? 2 weeks? 3 weeks? Here we
More or
are.
less. I'm ready.
We're all ready. So stay tuned. That will be our next episode reviewing Wonder Woman 1984. Be sure to visit fullcirclecinema.com. Follow us on all of our socials and
Mm-hmm.
be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are going to be posting this series, this new endeavor of Film Talk, every
Mm-hmm.
other Monday. Yes, we are posting on a Tuesday as a premiere, which is not setting expectations very well, but scheduling, interruptions occurred. But we will be
Mm-hmm.
posting mostly on Mondays, every other Monday, and talking about a little bit of everything. And I hope you guys enjoy. And this has been it. I've been Ileana Melendez.
I am Josie Melendez.
And this has been Film Talk. Thanks, y'all, so much for watching. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.